There was a time when the American dream felt like something almost anyone could reach. Work hard, save your money, buy a home, build a life. Maybe it wasn't easy, but it felt possible. Today, for millions of people, that dream doesn't just feel distant, it feels impossible. Owning a home has become something many families can't even imagine anymore. Affordable rentals disappear the moment they're listed. Wages have barely moved in years while everything else keeps getting more expensive. Electricity, groceries, insurance, fuel, it all climbs higher month after month. People are working harder than ever, yet somehow falling further behind. And now something even more disturbing is happening. It's becoming easier to punish people for being poor than it is to help them escape poverty. Think about that for a second. You can hear stories every day about scammers stealing people's life savings, or criminals walking away with little consequence. But if someone who has lost everything sleeps in the only shelter they have left, their car, their truck, their van, or their RV, they're suddenly treated like they've committed a crime. Somewhere along the way, simply trying to survive started becoming illegal. That should concern every one of us. Let's be honest with ourselves. None of this happened overnight. Housing didn't suddenly become unaffordable by accident. Families didn't all wake up one morning and decide they didn't want to work anymore. Millions of hard-working people didn't suddenly become irresponsible. The system slowly shifted beneath our feet. Now, instead of asking why so many people are struggling, too many cities have decided the real problem is that struggling people are visible. They're not trying to solve homelessness. They're trying to make sure no one has to see it. Because if the people disappear from public view, then maybe everyone else can pretend the crisis doesn't exist. And that's where we've arrived. Sleep in the wrong place? You're breaking the law. Park your vehicle too long? You're breaking the law. Someone notices you've been living inside your RV, suddenly you're a problem that needs to be removed. It's a strange world we've created. You're allowed to be broke. You're just not allowed to look broke. So how did we get here? When did poverty stop being something society tried to solve and start becoming something it punishes? Not that long ago, being poor meant life was difficult. It was a hardship people hoped to overcome. Then it became something people looked down on. Then it became an inconvenience. Now it's increasingly being treated as if it's some kind of public threat. Cities have found new language for it. Instead of saying they're targeting people with nowhere else to go, they use phrases that sound harmless on paper. Public nuisance, vehicular habitation prohibited, long-term parking restrictions, unauthorized overnight occupancy. The words sound administrative, but behind every ordinance is a real person. Someone who simply couldn't afford another rent increase. Someone who lost a spouse. Someone who lost a job. Someone whose retirement check no longer covers the cost of living. When you strip away the legal language, the message becomes painfully simple. If you can't afford traditional housing, your existence itself has become the violation. You can't stay in a tent. You can't sleep in your van. You can't park your RV. In some places, you can't even live inside an RV parked on land you legally own. Read that again. Your land, your vehicle, your property, still illegal. If that's not the criminalization of poverty, what is? And here's the part that makes it even harder to understand. We're constantly told there's no money to build affordable housing. No money for low-income housing projects. No money for assistance programs. Tiny homes violate zoning laws. RVs aren't considered acceptable housing. Sleeping in your vehicle is labeled unsafe. There's always a reason why helping people supposedly can't happen. Yet somehow there's always enough money for enforcement, enough money for new parking patrols, enough money for more tickets, enough money for towing companies, enough money for impound lots, enough money to place massive concrete barriers under bridges, enough money for fences, surveillance, police overtime, court hearings, and jail processing. It's amazing how quickly funding appears when the goal isn't solving the problem. It's moving the problem somewhere else. Because solutions don't generate revenue. Punishment does. Tickets generate money. Court fees generate money. Impound charges generate money. Private towing companies generate money. The system keeps finding ways to profit from people who already have almost nothing left. And that's a reality we don't talk about nearly enough. One phrase keeps showing up over and over again whenever these new laws are defended. Move along. It sounds harmless, doesn't it? Almost polite, as if someone is simply asking people to keep walking. But stop and think about what those words actually mean. Move where? With what money? To whose property? If someone is already sleeping in a vehicle because they have nowhere else to go, what exactly is the destination they're supposed to disappear to? That's the question nobody seems willing to answer. Picture a single mother doing everything she can to hold her family together, sleeping in a minivan because rent climbed faster than her paycheck ever could. Where is she supposed to move? Imagine a retired man living only on Social Security. His monthly check barely covers food and medication, while the cheapest apartment anywhere nearby costs hundreds of dollars more than he receives. Where does he go? The answer never comes. Because these policies were never really about helping people find somewhere to live. They're about making sure they don't stay where anyone can see them. That's a very different thing. If you're constantly forced to move, you never become part of a neighborhood. You never settle. You never belong anywhere. You become invisible. And once people become invisible, it's easier for everyone else to pretend they don't exist. Out of sight, out of mind. That's become the strategy. A lot of people have this romantic picture of living in a van or an RV. They see beautiful videos online, people waking up beside mountains, making coffee by a lake, driving wherever they want with nothing holding them back. It looks peaceful. It looks adventurous. It looks like freedom. For some people, maybe it really is. But for many others, it couldn't be further from reality. They aren't traveling because they want to. They're surviving because they have no other choice. The camera never shows the night spent wondering if someone is about to knock on the window. It doesn't show the anxiety that comes with every pair of headlights pulling into the parking lot after midnight. It doesn't show someone lying awake, hoping the next vehicle isn't security, a police officer, or a tow truck. Every unfamiliar sound becomes a reason to stop sleeping. Every flashlight sweeping across the windows sends your heart racing, because you know what usually comes next. A knock. That single knock can change your entire night. Maybe you're told to leave immediately. Maybe you're handed a ticket. Maybe your vehicle gets searched. Maybe it's towed. Maybe you lose the only shelter you still have. Think about how terrifying that really is. Imagine your bedroom having wheels. Imagine someone being legally allowed to force you out of it at 2 o'clock in the morning with nowhere else to go. Imagine knowing that the only place you can call home might disappear before sunrise. That's the reality thousands of people live with every single night. And when someone shines a flashlight through your window, they don't see a person. They don't see someone who's fallen on hard times. They don't see someone who worked for decades, paid taxes, raised children, served in the military, or spent a lifetime contributing to society. Too often, they simply see a problem. Not a neighbor, not a citizen, a problem. Somehow we've reached a place where having nowhere to go is treated like evidence you've done something wrong. That's heartbreaking, because most of us grew up believing in a very different promise. Go to school, work hard, stay out of trouble, save your money, buy a home, raise your family, retire with dignity. That was the path we were told would lead to security. For millions of Americans, that path has quietly disappeared. Today, average rents in many places are higher than an entire monthly Social Security check. Starter homes, the kind young families once bought to begin their lives, have become luxury properties. Large investment firms continue buying up neighborhoods, while ordinary families struggle just to compete. Tiny homes are rejected because of zoning rules. Manufactured housing becomes less affordable every year. Even RV parks, once considered a last resort, often have waiting lists stretching for months and monthly fees that many working people simply can't afford. So people do the only thing they can. They adapt. They sleep in the vehicle they already own. Not because it's their dream, because it's their last remaining option. And instead of asking why so many people have reached that point, too often the response is another ordinance, another citation, another fine, another criminal charge. At some point, this stopped being only a housing crisis. It became something much larger. It's about whether a person still has the freedom to exist without constantly being punished simply for trying to survive. That's a question every one of us should be asking, because if surviving becomes something only the wealthy can legally do, then this isn't just someone else's problem anymore. It's all of ours. Now, let's step away from the laws and the policies for a moment, because behind every ordinance, every statistic, and every headline, there's a human being. Someone with a story. Someone whose life didn't unfold the way they expected. Think about the veteran who came home after serving this country, believing that if he did everything asked of him, there would always be a place for him. Years later, he's sleeping inside an aging pickup truck because the support he counted on simply can't keep up with the need. Think about the woman who spent decades building a life with her husband. Then one day, he was gone. She buried the person she thought she'd grow old with, and little by little she watched her savings disappear right along with him. Now she's trying to survive on a fixed income that no longer stretches far enough to cover even the basics. Or the father who went through a divorce but refused to move hundreds of miles away because he wanted to stay close to his children. He works every day, he pays what he can, but rent has climbed so high that the only way he can remain part of his kids' lives is by sleeping in his vehicle. Then there's the woman quietly spending another night in a parking lot, not because she wants to, because in her mind, it's the safest place she can find. No one notices her, no one asks how she got there. Most people simply walk past. And maybe the hardest reality to accept is this. Many of these people have jobs. They clock in every morning, they deliver packages, they stock grocery shelves, they answer customer service calls, they clean offices after everyone else has gone home, they care for elderly patients, they keep restaurants running. They're doing the work that keeps communities functioning. Yet when the day is over, they still don't earn enough to afford a place to sleep. Think about how backwards that is. We've reached a point where having a full-time job is no longer a guarantee that you'll have a roof over your head. That isn't laziness. That isn't failure. That's something much deeper. Over the years, I've read thousands of messages from people sharing their stories. Different names, different cities, different backgrounds, but the emotions are remarkably similar. I never imagined this would happen to me. I worked my whole life. I thought I had done everything right. I just need a chance to catch my breath. Very few people are asking for someone else to solve their lives. Most aren't looking for handouts. They're asking for something much simpler. A little dignity, a little understanding. The chance to sleep through one night without wondering if someone is about to tell them they have to leave. It's incredible that something so basic has become such a difficult thing to ask for. No one should have to live in fear simply because they're asleep inside the only shelter they still own. When did that become controversial? Something else is changing, though. For years, people who lived in their vehicles often stayed silent. They carried the weight of embarrassment. They blamed themselves. They believed they had somehow failed. But that silence is starting to disappear. More and more people are speaking openly about their circumstances. Not because they're proud of struggling, because they're tired of pretending the struggle doesn't exist. They're beginning to realize they aren't isolated cases. They're part of a much larger story. When millions of hardworking people are facing the same impossible choices, maybe the problem isn't individual failure. Maybe the system itself deserves a closer look. That realization changes everything. Because systems can convince people they're alone, but they become much harder to defend when people recognize they're facing the same challenges together. And perhaps that's what makes this moment different. It's not the vehicles, it's not the tents, it's not the RVs. It's the growing understanding that countless ordinary people are living versions of the same story. That awareness has power, because once people stop blaming themselves, they begin asking different questions. And those questions are often far more uncomfortable than the answers we've been given for years. So where do we go from here? Maybe the first step is realizing that none of us should have to ask permission simply to exist. Survival should never be treated like a crime, and yet that's exactly what too many people are beginning to experience. When someone loses a home, they shouldn't lose their dignity. When life knocks them down, they shouldn't have to live in fear of being punished for trying to get back up. No law can erase the fact that behind every parked vehicle is a human life. A parent, a veteran, a retiree, a neighbor, a friend. People who have laughed, loved, sacrificed, worked, and dreamed just like everyone else. Some are only one unexpected medical bill away from losing everything. Some are one layoff away. Some are one divorce, one accident, or one family tragedy away. The truth is, the line between stability and survival has become much thinner than most people realize. That's why this conversation matters. Not because it affects a small group of people, because it could affect far more of us than we're willing to admit. Maybe the answer isn't waiting for someone else to fix everything. Maybe it starts with communities looking after one another again, sharing knowledge, sharing resources, helping people find opportunities instead of judging them for needing one, standing beside people instead of pretending they don't exist, because isolation only makes hardship heavier. Community makes it bearable. At the same time, people need to know their rights. They need access to reliable information. They need practical ways to protect themselves and make informed decisions. Fear grows in silence. Confidence grows through knowledge. The reality is, there are people who benefit when everyone feels powerless. They'd rather you believe you're alone. They'd rather you think your struggle is unique. They'd rather you stay quiet, keep your head down, and carry the blame yourself. Because people who feel isolated rarely ask difficult questions. But people who begin talking to one another, people who realize they're not the only ones, people who refuse to hide, those people become much harder to ignore. And maybe that's why these conversations matter more today than ever before. The people sleeping in cars, vans, trucks, and RVs aren't society's failure. They're evidence of a system that has left too many behind. They're not disposable because they don't own expensive homes. They're not worth less because they don't pay luxury rent. And they certainly aren't criminals because they're trying to survive. No paycheck determines the value of a human being. No zip code determines whether someone deserves dignity. No financial hardship should strip away a person's humanity. If the cost of simply existing has become so high that ordinary people are punished for falling behind, then maybe we've been asking the wrong questions all along. Maybe the real issue was never the people struggling to survive. Maybe it's a society that's become more comfortable managing visible poverty than confronting the reasons it exists. History has shown us something important. When enough ordinary people begin telling the truth about what they're living through, change eventually follows. Not overnight, not easily, but it begins with honest conversations, with refusing to accept that compassion is weakness, with remembering that every person deserves to be treated as a human being before anything else. If you're living through this right now, I want you to hear one thing. Your circumstances do not define your worth. You are not a failure because life became more expensive than your paycheck. You are not broken because you're doing everything you can just to make it through another week. And you are certainly not a criminal simply because you're trying to survive. The road ahead may not be easy, but you're not walking it alone. More people understand than you probably realize. More people are speaking up. More people are refusing to look away. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do isn't pretending everything is fine. It's telling the truth. Because the moment people stop hiding their struggles is often the moment real change finally has a chance to begin.